Good afternoon. I'm Jan Agati Abbarno, and we're going to talk today about my piece called Steampunk. I taught for a very long time, just to give you a little background, about 42 years, and I am now retired. I've been retired going into my 5th year. So I've been making art as well as teaching, but now I am in my studio full time. So I have to tell you, I'm born again. Born again completely and totally devoted to just making art, which is beyond words, beyond words. So it was a bit scary, it was a bit overwhelming, and extremely lonely to begin. But now I'm there, and nobody can stop me now. So. This series of work that I'm doing here is begun. I will tell you a little about technique first, and then we'll talk a little about, I'll talk first about materials, then about form, and then I will tell you a little about content or the story, where my energy is coming from for this, my references. So, first, materials. I begin with a small print in the back as a pentimento. The print that I start with on Reeves or Stonehenge paper is made with a simple plate. It's a latex plate. It's called a jelly plate. It's a very simple tool, but any simple tool can become a very sophisticated thing in the way in which you use it. I mean, right? Sticks, whatever. The jelly plate is made of latex. It is reusable, it is harmless, simple product. It wiggles, it smells good, you can pass it around. You just don't want to stab it or mar it with anything pointy like a fingernail or a paper clip or anything like that. You don't want to puncture it. Anyway, you roll ink on it, or you can use brushes or whatever, and with my original idea or concept somewhere floating inside, I make a print, and then I make a monotype. So somewhere in here is this square. It acts for me as a pentimento, sort of the ghost underneath. And from the ghost underneath, generated is the rest of the image, which takes months. This image came forth, and it took me 3 months for it to come out. And I am using only pencil. There is no ink. Pardon me. On this, I have used soy-based ink. So this singular image is done with soy-based ink and doesn't hurt the environment. So the pentimento originally, the single monotype, is done with ink. And then I come back into it with Caran d'Ache or Prismacolor pencils or some graphite. There is no paint in this at all. So all my work is mark making, all mark making. And I'm obsessed with mark making. And the nature of my mark making has to do with what I call my acoustic lines. I've finally given them a name. My lines are dealing with pressure, push, pull, in, out, light, heavy. My lines have to be either so aggressive or they have to be so light that they're almost like, when a violinist has one note at the end and they pick that bow up and they draw that single string into one magical line. And that's what happens in some of these lines or some of these lines. It's very hard because I wish for my audience to come close so you can have intimacy, but then I also wish for you to go far away and look at it from far away. I have not resolved this part of my work where I want people to not be intimate. I still want you to be intimate. I still want everyone to come close, so that they can crawl inside these minuscule little places and crawl in on those levels. So with the Caran d'Ache pencils and with the Prismacolor, I've begun. But the next thing that started to happen to me was I got crazy with the edges. I started to get confined to the box. Why am I in this box? It doesn't make sense. And all of a sudden, tearing began. I wanted to excavate the paper. So I started tearing. The tearing doesn't come after, the tearing comes while. So while I'm working, I begin to tear, and the tearing makes sense. So my thoughts on this particular piece, how much time do I have?
Oh, you're good.
5? Okay, so my thoughts on this particular piece were based on something that is uncomfortable for me. And as I looked at it, I thought, I got some historical references, and I thought of the dynamism of Giacomo Balla's Dog on a Leash, Dog Walking on a Leash, you know, how futurism came about. And then I thought of, you know, Leger, and I thought of, you know, futurism and cubism, and what it must have been like in the 19th century to move into the 20th century with industrialism. And then I thought about now, and I thought about technology, and I can tell you, I am not having a great transition into the technology of today. I mean, young children who are born today, they just begin. They pick it up. It's second nature. My son, who's now 38 years old, he was on the border, you know, so he didn't grow up with that thing in his hand, but he just took to it, I am not doing well with this. And so for me, learning computers, learning the technology of my iPhone, I love my iPhone, but I do not use all its parts. And I feel lost in that. I am not using the instrument to its fullest. This technology is driving me, making me feel like the civilization that we are moving into is leaving me behind. And I don't recognize what's coming. And so I'm churning, and I'm feeling like 19th century moving into 20, but it's not quite there. This is what this was about. We are moving forward. What will be our art? Who will make our art, and what will it look like? I can't even predict. I can't even imagine. So steampunk is a science fiction genre that melds machines and people. If you've ever seen the style, when people wear their little, you know, gears and parts of their faces and their boots, and they become part machine-like. This was all running through me as I was doing this piece. And that's why I ended up calling it steampunk. The last thing I intentionally did, just to give my viewers a little more discomfort, was I left one corner in a traditional white corner, like you might do on the corner of a regular drawing. But then I cut it on an uncomfortable angle. So here's where we're going. Here's where I came from. Steampunk. Any questions? That's it.
Thank you, Jen.